Okay, let's talk about one of the most brutal, most destructive conflicts in all of human history, the 30 Years' War. I mean, this thing completely tore Central Europe apart. It redrew the map, and honestly, it created the very world we're living in today. But here's the crazy part. This massive, continent-spanning catastrophe, this epic of destruction, it all kicked off with one of the weirdest, most bizarre acts of political protest you could possibly imagine. I mean, really? It all boils down to this one wild question. How did throwing two guys out of a castle window? Seriously, how did that lead to the deaths of 8 million people? It sounds totally made up, right? But it's not. That is exactly what happened. So let's get into the story of how one single act of defiance just spiraled out of control into a total continental bloodbath. To really get how this happened, we've got to rewind to the early 17th century. We're heading to a place that was basically a tinderbox, just waiting for a spark, the Holy Roman Empire. So you got to understand, the Holy Roman Empire was, well, it was a confusing beast. You know that old joke, right? That it was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire? Well, that's pretty much spot on. It was really just this messy patchwork of like over 300 different states, cities, and little territories. Each one had its own ruler, its own agenda, and they were all just loosely held together under this one emperor. I mean, it was a total recipe for disaster. And this right here shows you the biggest crack running right through the heart of the empire: religion. The Protestant Reformation had basically split Germany in two, and by 1609, things had gotten serious. You had two sides staring each other down. On one side, the Protestant Union, and on the other, the Catholic League. And let's be clear, these weren't just debate clubs. They were full-on military alliances, armed to the teeth and just itching for a fight. And this is where the fuse gets lit. So, in 1617, this super Catholic guy, Ferdinand II, he's named King of Bohemia, which, by the way, was mostly Protestant. You can see the problem, right? The Bohemian nobles were absolutely terrified he was going to take away their religious freedoms. So in May of 1618, they march right into Prague Castle to have it out with his officials. Things get heated, and, well, they end up throwing two of Ferdinand's reps and their poor secretary straight out of a 70-foot-high window. Now, the crazy thing is, they survived. The story goes they landed in a giant pile of manure. But whether that's true or not, the message was sent. This was a declaration of rebellion, loud and clear. The 30 Years' War was on. So what starts as this little local revolt in Bohemia, well, it starts to snowball, and fast. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger, pulling in more German territories, until it turns into a brutal civil war. So it all starts right here, in Bohemia. You have the Protestant nobles rising up against their new Catholic king, Ferdinand. Seems like a local problem, doesn't it? Yeah, not for long. The rebels go and offer the crown of Bohemia to a Protestant prince, Frederick V of the Palatinate. And he accepts. By doing that, he drags his own pretty powerful German state right into the war, throwing down a direct challenge to the emperor himself. And this is the moment it goes international. See, Emperor Ferdinand was a Habsburg, and guess who else was a Habsburg? The King of Spain. So to back up their family and to protect this vital supply line they had called the Spanish Road, Spain sends in the army. Now the fire is officially out of control. Once Spain jumped in, every other major power in Europe started paying attention. They saw threats, they saw opportunities, and the whole thing was about to explode. The continent's heavyweights are about to step into the ring, and they've all got their own agendas. First up, Denmark. The Danish king, Christian IV, he jumps in. Sure, it was partly to defend the Protestant cause, but let's be real. He was also looking to grab control of some very valuable trade routes in the Baltic Sea. And then comes Sweden, led by one of the greatest military minds in history, King Gustavus Adolphus. The Swedes rush in to save the Protestant side, which was honestly on the brink of total collapse, but also to make sure everyone knew that Sweden was now the top dog in Northern Europe. With every new country that joins, the war just gets deadlier and way, way more complicated. At this point, the war is just a chaotic mess. But the final phase, the final phase has the most cynical twist you can imagine. It's the moment it becomes crystal clear this isn't about God anymore, it's about power. And that twist is France. The last major player to join the fight was not only Catholic, it was run by a cardinal, Cardinal Richelieu. And you know what he does? He joins the Protestant side. It was a move that just left everyone in Europe scratching their heads. What on earth was going on?
Well, this move shows you what the war was really about by this point. Richelieu couldn't have cared less about Protestantism. What he cared about was French power. See, France was basically surrounded by its biggest rival, the Habsburg family, who ruled both Spain and Austria. For Richelieu, helping the Protestants win was way more important for France than letting his Catholic rivals get any stronger. Religion had just become an excuse for a massive, continent-wide power grab.
So we've seen all the grand strategy, the moves by kings and cardinals. But what did 3 decades of nonstop war actually mean for the ordinary people caught in the middle? Well, the answer is a catastrophe that's almost impossible to wrap your head around. 8 million. That's the estimated number of people who died. Just let that sink in. In some parts of Germany, the population was cut by more than half. Think about that. More than half the people gone. Entire regions were just destroyed, with armies of mercenaries roaming around, stealing food and burning everything they couldn't carry. But here's what's truly mind-blowing when you break down that death toll. You'd think most people died in battle, right? Nope. Only 3% of civilian deaths were from actual fighting. The real killers were the things that always travel with armies. The bubonic plague, spread by all these troops marching around, was responsible for nearly 2/3 of all deaths. Then you've got starvation and other diseases doing the rest. The armies were literally deadlier as carriers of disease than they were with their own weapons. Just incredible. And this quote, it just captures the pure psychological horror of it all. For the average person, life became a living nightmare. There was this frenzy of despair, a feeling that society itself was completely breaking down, as people tried to make sense of the constant, random violence that had just taken over their world. Finally, after 30 years of unimaginable slaughter, a completely exhausted Europe managed to stagger its way to peace. The treaty that ended it all, the Peace of Westphalia, didn't just stop the fighting. It fundamentally changed the continent and in many ways created our modern world. So this treaty did 3 revolutionary things. First, and this is the big one, it established the idea of state sovereignty. Basically, for the first time, it was recognized that individual states had the right to decide their own business, including their official religion, without some outside power, like the Pope or the Emperor telling them what to do. Second, it baked in a certain level of religious tolerance, pretty much ending the whole idea of a single, unified Catholic Europe. And third, it created a new balance of power. The Habsburgs were weakened, and France was now the dominant force on the continent. This was the birth of the modern system of nation-states we know today. And that brings us right back to where we started. A war that began with people being absolutely certain about their religious beliefs ended in a peace treaty based on cold, hard political reality. It's just a powerful reminder of how fast conflicts that are started in the name of some high-minded ideology can turn into nothing more than a brutal, cynical struggle for power and the unbelievable human price that gets paid when they do.